Robert Benton slowly spread his wings, flapped them several times, and sailed majestically off the roof and into the darkness. With these words, someone reading Philip K. Dick chronologically will likely begin. It is the first sentence of Stability, written in 1947 when Dick was 19 years old. It was not published until after he died, but it takes a leading position in the collected stories as Dick's first story. By 1947, the global realignment brought on by the Second World War was still being resolved, and the conflict between the Soviet Union, which became a symbol of bureaucratic and industrial tyranny, and the United States, which became a symbol of capitalism and freedom, was beginning. In Stability, Dick suggests that the choice was not so black and white. The reason we can begin to think that Dick was not resorting to simple cliches of the Soviet Union and was making an actual broader argument about freedom and bureaucracy emerges pretty quickly. Within a few paragraphs, the freedom and joy of individual flight experienced by Robert Benton quickly gives way to a stifling bureaucracy. The offices were gigantic. He stared down from the catwalk on which he stood, for below him 1,000 men and women worked at whizzing, efficient machines. Into the machines they were feeding reams of cards. Many of the people worked at desks, typing out sheets of information, filing charts, putting cards away, decoding messages. This is a typical Philip K. Dick image of a bureaucratic tyranny. The nature of this particular tyranny is essentially the same as the ones that will appear again and again in his novels and stories. In short, the political order's main goal is to sustain itself, and sustaining itself is often very hard work. Now let me come out and say it. For me, Philip K. Dick is a Promethean thinker who truly believed that it was the institution which gets in the way of progress. This is evident even in his early story. Stability is this regime's particular means of sustaining power. The bureaucracy strictly controls progress by restricting invention. Humanity has peaked, the controllers proclaimed. Future progress would be in name only. Any substantial change will cause social disorder from the betterment of humanity. Of course, at the same time, regression would not be allowed, so schools are devoted to maintaining stability by filtering out students who fall back. This is done through a weekly testing regimen. People who disrupt stability are carted off. All of this logic serves the system. Falling back would discredit it, but moving forward technologically, creatively, or socially would create the revolutionary situation that brought down many other decadent regimes. It seems the control office in Stability solved the problem of revolution, but as a result it had to embrace the end of history. Whether we're at the end of history or not is a real question for our time. Famously, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Francis Fukuyama argued that Western-style representative democracy, the rule of law, and free market capitalism was basically all there is and all there ever would be. This was a good thing for Fukuyama, who believed that any further social experimentation would be destructive. The end of the history is at the same time a great fear of the left. David Graeber recently gave a talk in which he condemned bureaucracy for ending social progress, in particular technological innovation. I can post a link of that below. Perhaps there is some truth to this politically. The current gridlock in the U.S. political system suggests that simply maintaining or slightly reforming the current welfare state is a victory. But any future development, such as a basic income or universal employment guarantee or debt jubilee, seem unlikely. Little wonders people idealize Steve Jobs or Tesla Motors, but not our politicians as the great innovators. Now back to the story. Robert Benton is called before the control offices and is told that his invention was rejected. Now this is not surprising. They issue only a few number of patents to usually simple and banal inventions each year. To Benton, this is a shock, however, because he did not even remember even submitting an invention for consideration. He takes the device and leaves. He quickly learns that the device is a time machine. He activates it and goes to some undetermined place and time. He finds a miniature city in a globe, about the size of a paperweight. A voice warns him that he's being manipulated by the globe. You were called here by it through time. You obey it now without question. I am its guardians, and ever since this time world was created, I have guarded it. Go away, and leave it as you found it. Now Benton takes it and has moved throughout time. He's moved to a few days before the story began, and submits the time machine for approval at the control office. Now sometime after Benton's initial encounter with the control office, the bureaucrats figured out that the device was a time machine and confront the so-called inventor. They give him the choice of killing himself or taking the cart. The institutional logic takes over at this point, reminding us of the brutality of institutions as seen in Tom Godwin's The Cold Equations, a science fiction story written a few years later. By breaking the laws, you have made yourself eligible for the cart, but we feel that you have done what you did without meaning to. We do not want to punish anyone without reason. We only desire to maintain stability. Once that's upset, nothing matters. Benton's fate is temporarily averted because the men become interested in the globe. It reminds one of the men of the story of an ancient evil city locked in a glass waiting to emerge. After a brief scuffle, the globe is dropped, broken, and the city is released. A new reality quickly emerges, replacing the bureaucratic stability with a mechanized, scientifically managed industrial world. Benton's final thoughts are of his duty to faithfully tend his machine. The story, which began with a contrast between the freedom of flight with the constraint of bureaucracy, leaves us with yet another contrast, either the end of history or the mad rush towards industrial progress. The later vision is more familiar, reminding us of the Soviet Union, or actually any tailorized factory setting in the industrial West. The scene is right out of Metropolis. These beans were tended. He saw the slaves sweating, stooped, pale men, twisting in their efforts to keep the roaring furnaces of steel and power happy. It seemed to swell before his eyes until the entire room was full of it, and the sweating workmen brushed against him and around him. He was defeated by the raging power, the grinding wheels and gears and valves. Something was pushing against him, compelling him to move forward to the city. Notice that the setting is pretty painful to imagine. The system, like the characters, is going forward, but to where? We know little about the city that took over the reality for Benton. But it's not stuck in the end of history. But neither does it have an optimistic goal. There's no evidence of a grand social project here. Because of this, the comparison to the Soviet Union breaks down. No, this is strictly the logic of the machine. Notice with me that although the story begins with a shifting reality, a common enough motif in Dick's stories, it is a grounded shifting reality. Almost always, Dick's shifting realities move between one horrible reality that we can understand to another horrible reality that we cannot understand. Those that do the shifting are almost always identifiable villains or systems. In this case, it's the mechanical technocracy stifled by bureaucracy. Now, in a way, the story shifts from questioning the end of history to addressing Lewis Mumford's concept of the machine. Mumford was one of the most important historical thinkers active in Dick's early lifetime, and it's quite likely that Dick was at least indirectly aware of his arguments. Among other things, Mumford uses the machine as a term for the entire bureaucratic and technological superstructure of society. Now, Mumford did not believe this was new. He argued that it existed as early as the ancient Egyptians, who used it to help organize labor to construct the pyramids. In fact, it's less a system of technologies than a system of human controls used to organize labor for grand projects, the grand projects required of civilization. In this sense, it's not stability also the logic of the bureaucratic machine? Are there only two choices? Either we are stuck in a banal world where our children will live out our life, the same life we lived with only a few upgraded technologies, or are we plunging recklessly into a future, leaving behind only a broken earth, broken souls, and broken bones? Now, Dick does not think so, but I think we're going to have to read a lot more before we can come to a conclusion about what that alternative may have been. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back shortly with analysis of other of Dick's short stories and later novels.